Good morning, or depending on where you're joining from, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here today. My name is Paula Worthington, and I work closely with the Not in My City team, and I'll be moderating this webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we do have a Q&A period at the end of today's presentations. I invite you to ask a question at any time. We will be moderating the chat. You won't be able to see other questions, but we'll be seeing everything here on our end at the Vancouver International Airport. And if you ask a question, we'd love to hear where you're asking from, which city you're joining from today. I'd now like to turn over the webinar to Amélie Bouvier-Bouchard, the Coordinator of Security here at the Vancouver International Airport.
Merci, thank you so much, Paula. Hello, everyone, bonjour, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. It means a lot to have you here for working together to address human trafficking in Canada. I want to start by acknowledging that we are on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people, and that it's important to approach today's conversation with care, especially knowing that human trafficking disproportionately impacts Indigenous people across the country. On this, to officially welcome us, I'm glad to introduce someone who, through her stories and song, in my very first week here at YVR, made a very meaningful impact on how I now think of reconciliation. Mary Point, Director of Indigenous Relations, thank you for being here.
Hi, Chikasiam. Hi, Chikakutanasiaya. Each while, hello, bonjour. Asiem Nasiaya. Asiem Nasiaya and to Mary Point, Tanitsanach Humatquiam. In those words, I said, respected visitors and friends, my name is Mary Point. I'm from Musqueam. I'm also from YVR. Today, I'm sitting in the Musqueam village of Ktsmaltsum, once known as the Blueberry Forest, a place of abundance. So I'm mindful every day that when I come to work, that I'm walking and working where my ancestors once walked and worked and lived and thrived until they were rudely asked to leave, and where many still rest beneath our feet. So we try to honor their time on this island in everything that we do. The last words I want to share with you, Amit Zapquatquilam, are really important words to my family. They mean all are welcome to enter this space. So in this case, it's our virtual space that we're welcoming you today. This is a seminar that's really important to me. As Amélie mentioned, murdered or missing Indigenous women is of great concern to our communities, and many of our women and girls do end up in trafficked situations, and it's a great burden for us all to carry. And here at YVR, it's mandatory for us to take the anti-trafficking training, so I'm really have good feelings in my heart to be here today as part of this important set of learnings. Yatataltalst, we're learning together. We're walking together. To get us started in a good way, I'm going to share a song that comes from my great uncle Dominic Point, his traditional name Tiakthet. Tiakthet and the Point family hail from the Musqueam village of Quayach. This song is our Musqueam paddle song. It's a song that we sing when we're entering a new community to let people know we're coming with good intentions. It's a song that we sing when we're standing in community to share a little bit about who we are. And it's a song that we sing to mark any important journey, a wedding, a funeral, a graduation, or days like today as we go on this journey of learning together. It's also a song our old people say when they're out on the water. They sing it over and over and over again until the ancestors come and sit with us. But I think they're here, and I know time is tight, so I'm only going to sing it once through. And for those of you who know it at home or online, I hope you're singing along with me. And for those who don't, maybe you'll learn. There is a key change in the middle. It's not a mistake. everyone that was singing in this room. I appreciate you. And I just raise my hands to each and every one of you today, because I feel lifted up to be sitting here amongst you in this important work, and I want to lift you up in return. Hi.
Yes, thank you so much, Mary.
Thank you very much, Amelie, and thank you, Mary. And I'll now pass it back over to Amelie.
Again, thank you so much. So I was asked to talk about what has YVR been doing with Not in My City since we started here back in 2023 with them. Well, I started my role here as coordinator security program back in 2024. So YVR had already been with Not in My City for over a year at this point. But I've spent over 20 years in the airline industry. So I always knew human trafficking was an issue at airports. It was part of the trainings that we had. And even back in my days as a customer service agent, I did have to make a few phone calls for some situations that just didn't feel right. But honestly, I really assumed that everyone knew at the airport. And it wasn't until I joined YVR security team that I learned that unfortunately, not everyone realizes that. Not everyone sees that it is an issue at all airports. So when I took over the coordinator position, I realized that we needed to really start with an awareness first approach. Because if people don't know trafficking is happening, how can we expect them to actually go out and look out for signs? If we wanted to create meaningful change, it had to start with building awareness across the entire airport. So we've been focusing on building a community that's informed, who knows what to watch out for, and how to report when something just doesn't look right. And we didn't stop at just the e-learning. The Not in My City e-learning, as Mary pointed out, is mandatory for all YVR employees, and whether you are new or already here, and we've even repushed it again this year, just to make sure everyone had another chance to do it again. But we really went and developed other ways to build awareness around YVR Airport. One of the first things we did is we did have the airport-wide awareness campaign. So the signs all over the airports, which a lot of airports have. But we also made sure that we put them up in the non-passenger screening, the NPS checkpoints for employees, to remind all employees around the airport to look out for signs. We also made sure that we started connecting different departments and different stakeholders. So we invited Not in My City last April to do a presentation at our airport security committee. So that we were able to connect various stakeholders, partners, and tenants around the airport. The e-learning for Not in My City, we also made it available to the entire YVR community. We've put it on our LMS platform for anyone at YVR to go ahead and do the learning if they wanted to, if they don't have their own. And we even connected Not in My City with our security partner to make sure that it was uploaded to their platform for e-learning. We made sure that our IT contractors, people on the floor, actually did the learning, since they're usually out there in front of the public. And we also are still part and an active member of the Human Trafficking Prevention Network of BC to make sure that we put people in connections around the airport. If somebody needed to connect with one of our partner and stakeholders, we try to make sure that they're able to reach that person. But one of the big pieces that actually made a lot of impact last year is our walk and talk sessions. So we created the walk and talk session as a special event for the Seeing Yellow campaign last year. What we did is we pulled the statistics that Not in My City had published for the campaign, some information from the e-learning, and some of our own information here at the airport. And we created a package that we present to people as we walk around the airport in areas of the airport where we know trafficking could be happening, and have group discussion with people, have quizzes, ask questions about the statistics. This makes it a lot more real when you are going out on the floor, instead of just being a computer screen that just tells you information. It forces people to be out and start looking and seeing what they're able to spot. And I always finish that with a, what can your team do? So over the last year, we've created multiple sessions, and we are actually going to make them a regular program now here at YVR. And we've reached over 19 different departments with a whole bunch of new ideas coming our way that we'll be working on in the future. And now what do we do? Looking ahead, we're focusing on expanding our relationship with law enforcement, and we're strengthening our local SOPs to make sure that we keep our SOPs tight, and that when we call something in, that we know it's being reported in the right way. Of course, we'll keep providing awareness sessions to the airport community, but we'll also keep learning from our partners so that we can continue improving how to prevent and respond to trafficking at the airport. And by being here today, you're part of that awareness effort too. You're part of that awareness effort too. My French coming out, my apologies. So I'll finish by asking you the same thing I ask at the end of all walk and talk sessions. Think about your own work at the airport. What is one thing your team can do to raise awareness or support prevention effort? Start thinking about it, start talking about it with your team, and see what ideas you come up with. So again, thank you so much, merci, for wanting to make a difference. And on that note, back to Paula.
Thank you very much, Amélie. And I'd now like to turn over the webinar to Paul Brandt, founder and CEO of Not in My City, co-chair of the Alberta Centre to End Trafficking in Persons, and of course, award-winning Canadian country music artist.
Thanks so much, Paula, and thank you everyone for being here and joining us today. For me, that moment where I met a trafficking victim for the first time, this little girl was 5 years old, and it made obviously an incredibly deep impact on me. And the question that I asked was, how can I be a part of teaching my son how to respect and interact with women, knowing that there is a demand that creates an industry like this. And when I have to answer my daughter when she's old enough, which she is now at 15 years old, when she says, "What did you do when you met that little girl?" I want to give her a good answer. And I think the people on this call also want to give a good answer to people that are being impacted by this crime. So first, I'd like to just recognize all of you for stepping up and standing with us to end human trafficking. Everyone who's on the call today, whether you're a massive international airport or an individual who believes in this cause, you're making a difference, and I'm grateful for your participation and support. It's been very busy lately, leading up to Human Trafficking Awareness Day coming up on the 22nd of this month. Interviews that I've been doing, presentations, had 2 excellent sessions here recently in the Calgary and Edmonton areas with Calgary Regional Emergency Room departments. 88% of trafficking victims access healthcare while they're being trafficked, and someone fails to intervene on their behalf. So this is another important front in our work. Also, the Stollery Pediatric Department in Edmonton, and we had great connection and feedback from that session. So Not in My City's been working with airports for more than 7 years to increase awareness and education in these key transportation centers, and really to work with you on coordination. To date, more than 22,000 people have taken our e-learning course, and we've partnered with 42 airports all across Canada. Now we have more airports coming online. We're now welcoming hotels, event venues, and a multitude of businesses that are standing with us. Right now, there's a spotlight on this topic of exploitation and trafficking due to current events, including the release of the Epstein files. We're seeing more calls coming into the Canadian Centre to End Trafficking. This doesn't necessarily mean that trafficking is increasing, but it does mean that our awareness efforts are working. So I want to thank our allies, people like you who are equipped with the knowledge and the tools to safely identify trafficking situations. This enforces what we've always known to be true. There's far more trafficking activity in Canada than what was historically being seen and recorded. Our work doesn't end there. Now that we can identify trafficking situations, we need to provide a unified and coordinated response to help victims safely exit and facilitate a pathway to recovery, rehabilitation, and supports. Very grateful for Amélie and YVR for the support that they're giving, and just such an excellent idea with the Seeing Yellow campaign with the Walk and Talk program. So for me, when I'm talking about this, I always say anyone can be effective in their role to push back against human trafficking, whether a person is a nurse, a teacher, a flight attendant. We all have unique parts to play. We're stronger when we can provide a more coordinated response together as one network. One of my favorite stories going through another partner airport was when I was headed through security. It was that awkward moment, where the cowboy hat is off and the boots are off, and the security guard was rifling through my stuff. And she noticed the yellow rose, the pin that I'm wearing. And it's so important for us. I'm seeing this pop up across the entire country, but she noticed my yellow rose. She stopped dead in her tracks and she said, "I took your training a month ago, and 2 weeks ago, I identified a trafficking victim and I knew what to do." This is what we're starting to see, and we're creating a trusted network. When people think about human trafficking, they often think about chains, but really this is a relational crime. What we should be thinking about is trust. When we build trusted networks, it's amazing to see the connections that we can create, and sometimes we can even prevent human trafficking from happening in the first place. So I want to thank all of our presenters here today who are leaders in the industry, and to all of our allies who've supported us and brought us to where we are today. This is truly remarkable. What was intended to be an airport webinar has turned into something much larger, and I'm proud to be here with you today and look forward to continuing our impactful work together. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Paul. And you're going to hear more from Paul throughout this webinar today. I'd now like to welcome Sean Power, Director of Security, Terminal and Airline Operations from the Edmonton International Airport.
Hello, bonjour, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to come speak with you today with my peers across the country, and Emile, Paul, and everyone. So just wanted to share with you sort of an Edmonton perspective on where we've been. And we've been a great partner with Not My City since the beginning. And it's so crucial to keep that focus going, as you'll hear throughout today's messages. And last year, we wanted to enhance that just a little bit more. And so we really, chatted with our friends down south at Calgary Airport with Paul and Fareed, and just really understanding what they were doing and how can we eliminate, or how can we work together and deliver that same, message and same ability to help where we can, and so on. So, Calgary did a great job of developing their safe room in Calgary, and just really working with them on what that looks like, and then working with Vancouver, as Emile said, on the signage. And we chatted with Barb from Vancouver to make sure that our signage is aligning across the country as well, is so key and so important. When we looked at the safe room and how well Calgary did at that, like, it was just really brought home the need to want to help some more. And what we're looking for is a dedicated and a trauma-informed space designed to support individuals in crisis, including survivors of human trafficking, domestic violence, mental health emergencies. And our goal was to provide that calm, private environment, so not accessible to public, and public doesn't know where it's at, and so on. But it's so key just to have that place of, that's safe and support. And, we just chose an existing room already in the airport, and had the ability to work with our partners on it to develop that. So we've reached out to everyone that wanted to help, or whether it was our contractors that was doing construction with us over the years, or like our hotel partners, or, helping with shampoos and just the basic toiletries that we can put in the room. And it's just really just meant to be, again, creating that safe and that warm feeling when they come into that room. And it's like Emile's been talking about, it's so key to get all partners involved and all police agencies involved. So we work very closely with the RCMP, Edmonton Police, CIS, and ACT Alberta, and Alert, and all of those key partners, just to make sure that we're all talking the same language, and that we're here to help, and that we have resources to help within that room. When we developed the room, it was really key significance to give it a name that really meant something to to human trafficking and so on. So we named our room Kese Watatawin, which means sharing and giving our kindness and compassion to each other. And that really drives home what we really want to do here, and focus on that help and support where we can. As Emile talked about, the e-learning training is absolutely fantastic. Right across the country, that's available at all airports, and just the ability to keep pushing that out and get people signed up to train. Here at YEG, when you apply for your restricted area identification card, we make that a part of the application as well, to go in and jump on and do that e-learning, to get the basis of what we're trying to get out there and the message that we're trying to get out here. And we're very lucky with our own YEG airport employees, we're at 95% of folks that are trained here in Edmonton, through that e-learning module and so on. Like Emile also talked about, so again, that consistent message right across the country, the signage, the FIDs, so the flight information display systems, you'll see, human trafficking, Not My City signage right across that, just again to, let people know that we're here, we're available if help is needed, and so on. And it's just that key focus on working with everyone to get that message out there and focus on that and just be, you know, a big of a partner with Not My City as much as possible. And we'll always be here to support them and support other airports. It's key that if you're doing something different, to be able to share it. So like Calgary, you know, shared with us their SOPs. So again, looking for that standard operating procedures for the room and how to use the room, and you know, and then share that with others, you know, if they're looking for it. And so it's just key and essential to keep doing that as well. Within the room, you know, it's just, again, providing those comfort items like beverages, access to the internet if required, or television, soft lighting. Here at Edmonton, we also have a bed that's got some clothing underneath, just in case there's some fresh clothing that's required, which is also essential too as well. And when you see the photo of the safe room here in Edmonton, the painting that's on the wall, that's got quite a significance to Edmonton. Our project manager grew up with the artist of that painting, and unfortunately she was trafficked through many years, and our project manager actually helped bring Jennifer home and safely home, and we work very closely with Jennifer to you know, paint that painting that's in the photo that you see of the safe room, and so on. And like Paul has some great stories, as he's already shared. And here in Edmonton, we, like, once that room was developed, 10 days later, we had our first survivor in that room, which is, again, lets you know the importance of it and why you need a safe room, and working together on that type of training and identifying as well. And then, you know, one of those situations, it's you're always involved, you're always engaged. And, you know, we had a mom that came in from Montreal, and unfortunately her daughter had been trafficked for many years. And we safely got her to the airport, and that unification, you know, they were able to unite there in that room too as well. And so it's just, you know, you're going to use that room as often as you you know, you think you will. But it's, again, I can't stress enough how important it is to you know, have such an opportunity to develop a room like that, develop e-learning training that Not My City has put off, and just, you know, putting that awareness out there, and just, you know, keep focusing on some of Not My City's focuses, you know, where it's just building that community awareness and action, and then that advanced learning practices that we do throughout the airport, and show how we can help and where we can help.
Thanks so much, Sean. We really appreciate that update and your incredible partnership. And, you know, I do have a little bit more to share on that story that you mentioned, and how the safe room actually ended up being used, and some of the specifics behind it. And so I'll share that with everyone here. We're so excited about our partnership with Edmonton International. And one of the things that I want to spotlight here is how this partnership has come about and been successful, because we've not been working in silos. You know, the safe room, soft room program has been gaining popularity with airports, stemming out of the work that we were doing at YYC in Calgary. And Edmonton International stepped in, looked at that template, and thought, how can we make that work here? How can we you know, jump onto this and take the learnings and then make something even more of it? And so this is really gaining popularity across Canada, and we're excited to hopefully see that Not My City network of safe rooms now start to build as the program continues. The rooms were actually survivor informed as well. Survivors vetted the rooms. They came in to check and see that everything that was needed was going to be there. And I would say that you know, they were definitely designed and outfitted with the you know, insight of survivors to make sure that we had everything that needed to be there in the room, and that people would feel supported. When we started this program in Calgary, initially we thought that this would be a symbolic gesture, that this would just be something that we would create a space and we'll kind of see how it goes. It's something that we can talk about. But in the first month, the partners in Calgary used their room so much that they're contemplating even a second room right now. So what we found is when we created the space, it was definitely something that needed to be used. And that instance that Sean was mentioning about the first use 10 days after the launch of the Edmonton International Safe Room, this came in from an investigator. And I'll read from the email. He's talking about a girl named Shelby, and Shelby is a safety network coordinator, another position that Not My City launched in Alberta. to be able to be a go-between, to be able to go between law enforcement and survivors to create trust. Trafficking victims are often trafficked for up to 7 years, and it can take up to 7 attempts for the system to be trusted enough by them to decide that they want to take a safe exit. And Shelby and the safety network coordinator position are integral to that response. So the investigator said, hey, Paul, last night Shelby and I assisted with an investigation from out east in Toronto of a female dealing with human trafficking. I'm going to spotlight here too in this story just how much interconnection is required, us working with no borders and not in silos, but working together. So they dealt with this female from Toronto, and she was in Calgary initially, but due to some concerns, she was transported to Edmonton, where she felt more safe and protected. It was arranged by Peel Police in Ontario to fly her back from the EIA, to continue her path to safety. This female was directed to the safe room by RCMP, where the safety network coordinator and this investigator met with her. And he says the safe room was amazing. She immediately felt protected, supported, and comforted. It was a breath of fresh air. While speaking with her over the next several hours, she became more regulated and trusting of the police. The safe room was, and this is in capital quotes, perfect. It provided more than just the basic needs, but mental and emotional support because of the environment. It was a great experience. He says, furthermore, the RCMP did a great job at Edmonton International Airport. They treated her with compassion, protection, and sensitivity. She's currently flying back to Toronto, where she will continue to get support with other officers. And he says, and I will reach out to her this afternoon to make sure that the handoff is appropriate. The background on this case was that the female had a lot of difficult trauma, more than could be explained in the email. And this investigator says that he believes that because of the safe room, the RCMP's response and meeting her with that quick response actually helped with her regulation. Trauma victims often, can't build those trusting relationships or even really function until that regulation takes place, and the safe room environment helped her to step back from that paranoid perspective that she had into a perspective of peace and a form of stability. I also want to share another very quick story before I move on here of training that's happening in the Alberta region. In southern Alberta, we recently had Lethbridge Police reach out on an active human trafficking case. And just from a training perspective, this investigator let us know that he was able to see the signs, know what to do, and actually recover a 14, 15, and 16-year-old who were all being held against their will. The 14-year-old was being trafficked because of Not in My City training and enhanced training that was brought to that investigator and investigators all over the province. So these coordinated approaches, the lights starting to come on and the way that we're seeing them come on, this is what it's all about. And the airport program is taking a lead in this. I'm having organizations reach out from across Canada, airlines, businesses, performance venues from my last tour saying, hey, we're seeing the signs at the airport. How can we be a part of the Not in My City network? So you're taking the lead, and we're very grateful for that. So I'm going to move on to our next guest. I'm so excited that she was able to join us here today. Jennifer Richardson is a survivor and also Canada's chief advisor on human trafficking, to combat human trafficking here in Canada. And she's become a great friend, a confidant. We're text buddies for sure, back and forth. She's also a fellow data and Supreme Court decision and legislative nerd. We love reading through all of those documents and comparing notes on those, and I find that very, very helpful in the work that I'm doing. And she's also in the early stages of the airport program. She served as an advisor to Not in My City, explaining to us why the airport connection was so important. So without further ado, very grateful. I'll just pitch it on to you. Thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks, Paul. Good morning or afternoon, wherever you are in the country today. I just want to thank everyone too for coming together to listen to this webinar this afternoon or morning. I think it really is and demonstrates how educating and training and coordinated kind of actions are really all of our collective responsibility, which is very important. And for sure, as Paul mentioned, I have for a very long time believed that airports can play an extremely critical role for folks and in safeguarding those people who are passing through those terminals. So as Paul mentioned to you, I am Canada's Chief Advisor, but I am not coming today as Canada's Chief Advisor. I am speaking as someone whose life was directly shaped by this crime. My perspective on trafficking comes from a child who was trafficked, but also from working with trafficked people for a number of years, and especially children, but also from leading 2 different government strategies to tackle and prevent exploitation, which is critically important. I talk to a lot of survivors throughout my day, and one of the consistent messages that I really often hear from them is that they wish there was more training and awareness and coordination happening when they were being trafficked as much as happening today. There's a bit of sadness in that, but I would also say that there's a lot of gratitude. And for sure, I am deeply grateful that folks like you are doing the work, taking the training, can recognize the signs. I think for a really long time, a lot of awareness was primarily focused on traffickers driving people or highways, which is true. They do drive people, they are trafficking to other cities, but that created almost a misconception, I think, that people are always being driven places and they're not in airports. Traffickers have always flown people to where they want to traffic them. And that's critically important that we understand, so that again, you can, understand and see the signs and then intervene. I think what is really also important to talk about is how airports are critical environments where you can identify and interrupt human trafficking. Traffickers do move people. It is one of the ways in which they isolate people and avoid detection. And that mobility allows traffickers to really maintain control and then deepen the dependence that the victim feels on the trafficker. And that's not done, haphazardly. That is done strategically. So it's important when we are working together, airports, jurisdictions, and different sectors, you are creating opportunities for prevention and early intervention through training your personnel, predictable checkpoints, or consistent public presence. Those mechanisms in airports are really one of the few environments where it truly is possible, if people know what to look for, to intervene. I can definitely say, as a child, when I was being trafficked, I was trafficked through many Canadian airports. I would struggle probably to think of one that I wasn't trafficked through. I was definitely very anxious and terrified of being arrested because my trafficker gave me another victim's ID. We were the same height, the same hair color, same eye color. She was 19, I was 14. And I was told by my trafficker that if I said anything or got caught, that I would go to jail. But I didn't have any number to call. And quite frankly, as a child, I didn't have the cognitive development to even outthink an adult trafficker. There was no awareness at that time. And even when there was intervention, I would say at that time I was blamed and labeled as a runaway. And that actually left me feeling quite invisible. It took me a very long time to overcome how many people seen me on a daily basis and did not intervene, as well as it took a really long time for me to overcome my belief that no one cared or that people thought I was worthy of saving, and recognizing it wasn't my fault. So you guys doing this work and having, the ability to respond and intervene will stop that thought in other victims, which I think is really important. It's actually, what I said in my quote that's in an airport in Ontario was, trafficked children are being transported across Canada, including through our airports. And if only that information was available on how to ask for help, I might not have been one of them. As I mentioned, though, I am definitely grateful for all of the work that everyone on the call is doing, for the work of Not in My City, because to me, I clearly understand how that can really change someone's experience. And the awareness building that you're doing, the training, the signage, that can make the difference between continued exploitation and the first moments of safety, which Paul and folks just talked about. Human trafficking in Canada, I think Paul mentioned as well, remains really underreported. There's lots of reasons why that is, but we know that a significant number of victims are children. Unfortunately, children are much more valuable. They can be sold for a higher profit, They're easier to manipulate, and they're less, credible in court, unfortunately. And my experience in having worked in this field for over 2 decades now is really that families only learn about trafficking, unfortunately, when it's happening to them. It's one of those things that's really easy to say that wouldn't happen to my child or that happens to other people's children, but that is just simply not true. This is not a fringe crime. It is happening in large airports, small airports, and pretty much everywhere in between. And I've definitely noticed the work that's happening across the country. I have to travel across the country lots, and I've seen how it's growing. I think Paul said you're up to 42 plus more airports as part of that coordinated awareness and training efforts. And to me, that is a national shift. This isn't just like a one-time project or, a collection of isolated initiatives. This really, and I think I've heard Paul say this, is a collective movement towards safety. And I would 100% agree with that. Visible awareness materials, decals, posters, information cards, all of those awareness pieces really equip staff and the public to recognize possible trafficking and to know where to report it if they have concerns. For victims, that can sometimes be the only signage or the only thing they are seeing that the traffickers are not. And it also, like I said, tells them, we see you. This isn't your fault. This is an actual crime that's happening to you, and there is help. And so that is really important. That can really change someone's opinion on, how do I access help? Because the traffickers are telling you all the time that people won't help you and the police are going to arrest you. So them seeing that really helps them to, figure out that maybe what the trafficker is telling me isn't true. I also think training across airports and the different roles within airports builds a lot of confidence. And one of the things I think, that it builds confidence in is you understanding that it isn't your role to investigate, or most of you who work in airports, it's not going to be your role. For more than a decade, I investigated trafficking. And one of the things that I heard over and over and over again was really that people would say to me, something didn't look right. My gut told me something was wrong, but I didn't want to get that person in trouble. So training really tells people and helps people to understand that you don't have to determine if the trafficking is happening. You only have to report what you see. And the more teams understand indicators, the more confident they become in that. The more consistent the training is, the more coordinated your interventions become, which, we just heard. And I think the more we normalize conversations about trafficking, the harder it becomes for traffickers to operate without detection, which is critically important. The safe rooms that we're just talking about in Calgary and Edmonton, those I think are another essential component, because when someone is identified, we can, as Paul mentioned, support them in a calm, trauma-informed space where they might feel safe enough to share what's happening to them. And that safety can often, again, be the difference between disclosure and silence. And now with the partnerships between airports and police and the community, you're creating clear pathways for reporting and intervention. Multiple partners across multiple jurisdictions aligned to the same goal. To me, that is systemic change. And I have watched where we are strategic and systemic change is happening, we are saving lives. So I think it's really important, Paul mentioned it as well, how to work with survivors and to ensure that survivors of HT are looking at your materials, viewing them, because they are much better in tune with how trafficking is occurring and trending. A long time ago, an example of having trafficked folks use or access QR codes and not telling them to not use their own cell phones. Traffickers are now tracking those cell phones with spyware and GPS and call logs, and sometimes they're even, physically able to control that device. So asking a victim to use their own phone could put them in danger. So we need to make sure, again, that they know not to use their own phone, but they also know that they can go to staff to make safe calls, that there's other, airport internal communication points they can access. QR codes are great for public folks and can get people information really quick, but we want to make sure that we are, letting trafficked folks know that their phone is likely being monitored. And as someone who did walk through many Canadian airports being unnoticed while I was being trafficked, I do, again, want to really say that your work matters. The awareness you have in coming to these types of events and learning more matters, and your willingness to act really matters. Through the work that you're doing, you are really building that safety net for children and other people being trafficked that they deserve, that for the most part, they're going to be told they don't deserve. So, I again just really want to thank you for doing this work, and thank you, for continuing to come to these types of events so you can learn more about trafficking and intervene.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. That was incredibly powerful, and we appreciate you being here and making the time out of your incredibly busy schedule. And I just want to echo something that you mentioned. Speaking in emergency rooms here recently, there have been instances where entire emergency room departments have felt this level of stress when they, identify a trafficking victim, provide resources, and then that victim decides not to take those resources at the time, and that can be very difficult. And you mentioned how it's not the job of the airports to solve human trafficking. It's the job of the people working in the airports to know what to do when they see it, and that can really take a lot of stress out and be very empowering when we're thinking about what our responsibility and our response is in this work. So thank you so much for being here today, and I'm going to move over now to our next guest who's been able to join us. Susanna Pierce is the founder of the Human Trafficking Provincial Network of British Columbia. And I've been so thankful for and impressed with Susanna's advocacy, professionalism, her passion and drive, and being willing to create platforms for collective action in British Columbia and across Canada. She truly understands the importance of working together in collaboration and practices this in her daily work. And I've also been grateful to serve with her on the Alberta Centre to End Trafficking in Persons Governing Board, which I chair. And she also continues to serve as an advisor to that board. So please welcome Susanna Pierce.
Hello, and thank you so much, Paul. And Jennifer, it's so wonderful to see you also online today. I think we owe you a huge debt of gratitude, as well as Paul, for all the great work that you're doing. And of course, everybody online that's engaged in this very important issue. And of course, I became familiar with this issue actually through Paul's organization as well, when I was working in a location, and I became familiar with the fact that trafficking could be happening in this remote location. And I think I said something to the effect of "not in my city," in part because I felt some sense of obligation to the community in which I was working. And becoming familiar with it, it was one of those things where once you know, you have to do something about it. This is about our children. This is about our people. And each one of us as human beings needs to look out for each other. And this is one of those issues where what you're doing at the airports is precisely that. For my part, I was in a major multinational corporation, and I took this issue on because I felt that in some of our locations that trafficking could be happening. And so engaged with Paul, but then also established something called the BC Network to Prevent Human Trafficking, which is essentially the Human Trafficking Prevention Network in BC. And this is really to take a systemic approach. So while you are representing airports, this systemic approach would do everything from raising awareness to prevent trafficking from happening in the first place, through to providing the frontline services supports of organizations that can help for victims if they need to escape, find a safe place to stay, to trauma-informed healthcare, mental health care, drug addiction services, to working with organizations such as yours that work in transportation corridors or transportation networks, to looking how we coordinate very closely with law enforcement. So the Vancouver Police Department as an example, or the RCMP, to working with and assisting and encouraging government to take a more proactive response, particularly here in British Columbia. And of course, the criminal justice system and things like the Crown, how are they really paying attention to human trafficking? And then finally, I have to mention the private sector, because very often trafficking will happen in our venues, in our locations. So how are we enabling each one of us who work in the private sector to become familiar with this? So as we prepare for events that might be happening, surge events that might be happening in each of our communities, how are we working like a village, like a community, understanding that a network needs to share information, share resources, collaborate in times of crisis, really focus on how do we deal with a crisis event. And as Paul was saying, In the event that a victim is in the airport and you bring the victim to a safe location, it is not the airport attendee's responsibility to help the victim beyond provide the resources that can help the victim, provide the expertise. And this is how the village works. This is how the network works. So again, as we move into what I have been told by my police colleagues is the elevated risk scenarios, which could be anything from major events that might be happening in your location. It could be anything from transient workers that might be going to a location for a period of time. This is where we really need to network together to understand the risk, to mitigate the risk up front, which is to prevent the risk from being realized, and then knowing there's always going to be that residual risk, which means that there's always going to be the risk this will happen. What do we do about it? That is the purpose of the network. That's why it has been established. Not in My City has been fantastic in working with us, as had the airport, who have been one of the founding members of the network. And I guess what I would encourage for each of you representing so many organizations across the country, look to ensure that your network is working as well. Because as we know, human trafficking is happening all the time. It's not just focused on one event. It's not just focused on one location. The more that we network at the community level, then build that network out to the provincial level, and then build that network out to the federal level, and then eventually internationally, we will raise awareness, we will share common information and understanding, and we will have a profound impact on both preventing and addressing human trafficking wherever we are. So thank you for the opportunity, Paul, to be here with you today. Thank you, Jennifer, also, and all of you for participating.
Thank you so much, Susanna, for that update and for just your challenge for us to be working together. I love how you talk about the network as a village, and that really is what's needed to make sure that we have the value and impact that we are trying to have. Awareness with action ends exploitation, and it's exciting to see lights coming on all over the country in this way. Another area of focus that Not in My City has right now is increasing safety during large events. Human trafficking can increase during large-scale events where there's a heightened anonymity and an opportunity for exploitation. The traffickers often move victims to these events to meet increased demand. And we know public awareness is one of the most effective tools to prevent and to disrupt human trafficking. And every person, whether working in transportation, hospitality, or security, or as a spectator or a member of the public, can be a part of the solution. So we put together a special package to ensure that our allies feel prepared and empowered during any large event. We're going to make sure that all of you get a copy of this, and I'd encourage you to integrate it into your security protocol. And with that, I'll pass it on to Paula.
Thank you, Paul. Sorry, there's a small delay there. I'd now like to invite everyone to add any questions that you may have into the chat. We'll be able to see them on our end, and we'd like to take some of the time we have left today to address some of those questions. I'm going to help moderate and redirect those questions appropriately. We do have a question that came in from Laurel. Thank you for your question. I'm going to have Paul respond to this one first, and then if anyone else of our speakers would like to include some commentary there, please feel free to do so. So Laurel's asked, how do we build trust and assist victims with accessing resources when there is a fundamental disconnect and mistrust between the most vulnerable and disproportionately impacted populations and the resources which are in place to assist them? And I know this question comes up often, so I think it's a great one. So Paul, I'd love to get your comments on that first.
A big part of it is ensuring that we see the signs and we know what to do when we see them, and to trigger the response so that there's a wraparound that happens. That community response model is really key in the work that we're doing. So, you know, the example that we used earlier in the story that I was able to read, I don't know if you were on when I was talking about it, but at Edmonton International Airport, where there was a victim who was identified, brought to that place, and the safety network coordinator who has the trauma-informed specialty to be able to actually start to build that relationship, to know when to lean in more, when not to. That's where the trust really begins. Sometimes it can take 7 interactions before someone trusts the system enough to actually say that they want to receive the resources that are being offered. And it's very much a relational crime, and there has been an abuse of trust, and so it requires a relational response. And I think that you know, the more that we work together as a team and as a response unit, making sure that there are warm handoffs, understanding that, I heard one investigator talk about, how it's important to just not make it weird. We're not hiding behind, our name tags or our positions or any of those things. We're actually interacting with people in a very human way in the way that we're doing this. And I think what Jennifer was talking about earlier as well was really key. That bump into factor from a marketing and branding perspective of the yellow rose is something that survivors have said to us over and over again, that if there was a universal symbol, a universal sign, I might have believed that there was someone who was there for me. Something that I could see over and over again that made me actually think about what it was that I could reach out to and be able to access supports. There's a story that I'd also like to share really quickly on this that came in talking about that trust and how to build that trust with a survivor. This is a story that I'm just pulling up here right now that an investigator shared with me. It was a victim impact letter that a survivor wrote to two investigators. And it's interesting. I think that it's got a little bit of humor, but it's also very touching when you hear about this. And this is just an example of that relational approach. So David Lane is with the RCMP. His partner Robbie. They look very, very, very different. Robbie is very tall. He's muscle bound. David is not so tall. So when they walk in the room, you really see their differences. And this was a survivor that was identified in Nova Scotia. And the people even on the human trafficking unit were looking at her and going, how do you even help someone like that? There was one person who hadn't been on the unit for very long that said something quite derogatory about her as well. And David was trying to find a way to be able to make the connection for his unit and lead and show the relational approach. So she sat down in the room after she had accessed resources and was recovering. And she wrote this letter and she read it to Robbie and David, the police officers. They're sitting in the room. And I'll just read it to you now. She says, despite the shit people are talking about the RCMP, you're pretty cool. I know I'm an awful person sometimes, but hey, we all are. I do a lot of things I'm not supposed to, but at least I'm not out fighting people or shoplifting or robbing the liquor store, LMAO, is what she says. She said, you've saved me from some pretty messed up people and situations, and I'm extremely grateful for that. You always respond to my texts, no matter what time it is. And that means a hell of a lot to me. Just a reply from you has made me rethink attempting suicide. So thank you. I always said I would never engage in anything like the sex trade or doing drugs, but I did. And you were my savior. I believe God sent you guys to my rescue in a moment of need to set me back on the right track. And with a little more assistance, I believe I really could do it. You two have honestly made my life a whole lot better, and I have no clue where I would be without you. And at that moment, she paused for a minute because Robbie, the great big tall muscle-bound guy, was bawling his eyes out. And she looks at him and she goes, are you going to be a little bitch or let me finish? And they both started laughing their heads off. And she says, thank you so much for helping me out of the sex trade and making me realize that I'm worth a whole lot more than I think I am. I wish there were no bad guys in this world. It would keep everyone a whole lot safer, especially you guys. And every time you guys enter a house, you risk your lives, but you do it to protect ours. And I guarantee you people would be a hell of a lot more respectful to the RCMP if they understood that. To me, it's just such a heartwarming example of what it means to be invested and bring that relational approach. And I really do believe that our airport program and our safe room program are integral to that response. And maybe I'll just open it up quickly to any of the other people. Maybe Jennifer, if you're still on, I'm not sure if you're still with us, or anyone else who has something else to share.
We'll see if Jennifer is able to join in here. Thank you for that, Paul. I have a question from Corinne asking about whether there's a hotel-specific program similar to the airport program with so much travel in trafficking, assuming that hotel stays are happening too.
I can jump in on that, Paula, for a moment. I do know that there are airport programs that are being hotel programs that are being implemented. Not in My City has a growing network of hotel partners across the country, and yeah, it's very important. One of the partners that we have is with the Marriott Hotel, and they are leaders in this space internationally and have done amazing work in even spreading some of the awareness and education throughout the hotel industry. And so yes, definitely, I think it's a great question, and they're an important part of the network. And Not in My City does have hotels partners across the country.
I'll just piggyback on you, Paul, because we're seeing here in British Columbia that the BC Hotels Association indeed is saying not in my hotel. So again, leveraging the Not in My City work, which is great. I think the important thing that we'd like to see, though, is just like YVR, that the training becomes mandatory. Because it's one thing to have a program and put it up on a website, but it's another thing to see that people are actually trained. And I think that's really the next level for the Hotels Association. But just as we discussed earlier, we're beginning to see also good role models sharing what good looks like, then rolling across the country. So I'm quite hopeful that we'll see more Hotels Association. And then on top of that, restaurant associations, because again, these are the locations where this can happen. And the more that we can leverage the sharing, the information, the training, the better.
That's great. Thank you so much. A question from Peter at Jazz. He forwarded to Jennifer. I know Jennifer, we're trying to get her back on the stage here. Does the government of Canada have an awareness plan for the public? And I think we've got Jennifer here. I'll let her touch on that, as well as Jennifer. There was a previous question, which I'll reshare with you in case you didn't hear it. We'd love to get your feedback on it. The first question was, hi, Jennifer. The first question was, how do we build trust and assist victims with accessing resources when there's already a fundamental disconnect and mistrust between the most vulnerable and disproportionately impacted populations and the resources which are in place to assist them? Would love to get your thoughts on that. And then as well, any resources from the Government of Canada.
Yeah, I think Paul did a great job, and Susanna, hi, she added as well, I think, to, the mistrust. Folks for sure do have mistrust because you're told every day that no one's going to help you, you're going to be arrested, your family's not going to accept you back. Once people know what's happened to you, you're going to be shamed and isolated. So I think just, again, them seeing, or folks seeing that isn't the response, that in and of itself kind of shakes you. But, both Paul and I talked about sometimes people are just not able or ready to accept the resources at that time. And I know Paul mentioned a stat that I also use a lot too, whereas it does take folks sometimes multiple times, up to 7 is kind of the average, to leave the situation. So I think every time we have, and I used to train a lot of police, so I would say every time you have contact with someone who's being trafficked, your kindness, how you treat them, how you speak to them, how you interact with them can actually make or break whether they're going to come forward again. And that's really true for everybody. That's true for, folks in schools, education systems, the healthcare system, not just policing. But if the societal messages you get when you're being trafficked is that, you're bothering people, or you're not worthy, or, you're not good enough for them to respond to you, then it actually unintentionally reinforces what the trafficker is telling you. So I think every time you have a positive contact with someone being trafficked, that in and of itself, just that positive contact, is giving them, having them question, what's this trafficker, telling me? Why is he saying this? This wasn't, my experience with this person, which you heard Paul just, read from that one trafficker. That one traffic victim, that, having the interaction she did with police wasn't the message, or wasn't, what she thought it was going to be, and how their response to her really enabled her to continue moving forward. And almost every traffic person I've ever worked with, that is exactly the same thing that they've said to me is, they expected me to drag them out kicking and screaming, or to force them to go and get help right at that moment. And that just doesn't work. But just the fact that we're acknowledging that there is help, and that, they can get it, that does a lot. That does say a lot. I know it doesn't sometimes feel that way for folks, but yeah, it really does do a lot. And then, yes, I did add some of the public awareness materials that the federal government has put out over the last several years. But there's a lot of public awareness that is also done by not-profits in Canada and charities like Not in My City. So again, there's lots of resources for folks if they really want to learn more and access more materials. They are out there for sure.
Maybe just another question while we have you on here, Jennifer. I wonder, is there like a plan for, this is coming in from Peter from Jazz, does the government of Canada have an awareness plan for the public?
Well, I am an independent, so although I am an independent, my role isn't like it was in Ontario or Manitoba where I directly led the strategies. So I can't really speak for the federal government. Personally, I haven't seen a specific plan other than all of the public awareness materials that the federal government has launched since 2012. I think they've had materials out. But.
And there was actually also another question that had come up about how to connect with Not in My City, and we'll make sure that we have that in the chat here coming up. You can either scan a QR code, or we'll even just put the website that you can reach out to. I think it's info@notinmycity.ca. I think that's being uploaded right now, and you'll get a chance to see that. So Paula, maybe I'll pass it back to you.
That's great. Thank you so much. A question from Laurel, and I think this is another really interesting one. She asked, what can we do when we're traveling ourselves and we may witness activity which might be indicative of trafficking? She was in a situation where she was visiting another country, so there wasn't the same resources available, and there was a language barrier as well, and witnessed trafficking activity in an airport. Obviously, she felt very challenged and couldn't identify a safe way to assist. So is there anything that people can look out for if they're not in Canada and they're not around the Yellow Rose?
A great question. I'll jump in, and Jennifer, you might have some information on this that you want to share too. But I do know that, you know, in other jurisdictions, there are also hotlines and resources that are available. I don't know which country you were in there, but you know, I think this just speaks to the importance of having as unified a response as possible. One thing that I found really interesting when we started the Not in My City program was that it wasn't mandated federally to have human trafficking awareness in the airports, and we saw, you know, through Project Blue and a number of other resources stateside that mandate was there. So Canada just responded. We responded through Not in My City, and we see people come on board. And what's powerful about that is that we didn't need to have a mandate to do it. What that actually shows is there's a cultural shift. And I think that's what's so powerful about this network is when people know the signs, they talk about it with each other, they figure out, you know, what the standard operating procedures are going to be, they work all of these things out in real time, it becomes a culture change instead of, oh, now we just have to follow these rules. And I think that's actually one of the things that makes Canada's growing response as powerful as it is. But I would say that, you know, I think being in a situation like that, traveling internationally, looking for local resources is the best thing that you can do. And I think that, you know, we always say at Not My City, awareness plus action ends exploitation. And I think that sharing within your own local networks, talking to people, looking for resources, keeping this conversation going, like Jennifer was talking about, is really the best thing we can do at this time. But as we continue to strengthen the Not in My City network, and we actually are measuring for value and impact, less than 6% of anti-trafficking NGOs actually measure for outcomes. And that's something that we've really dedicated ourselves to in the work of Not in My City, so that we can actually show that there's measurable impact. You can't change what you can't measure. And so we are definitely investing in that heavily. And then we'll be able to share that information with other countries around the world and help them to increase the efficacy of their anti-trafficking efforts, and also it's just survivor centered response. So I don't know if anyone else wants to add anything on that.
No, I think you nailed it, Paul. Most countries now, I want to say in the European Union, Canada, America, Mexico, we all have a very similar national reporting framework, Australia as well. But to your point, you didn't know that. So it would be great, because every time I travel, I can for sure tell you that I see exploitation no matter what country I'm in. But it would be great if people would look for resources as to the country they're going, where they should report if they'll see it. Because even in Airbnb, you can still see it happening. So in a hotel, wherever you are, in restaurants, when you're traveling, knowing, does that country have a referral mechanism before you go, would be a great way, I think, to leverage what some countries across the globe are doing to tackle trafficking.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. Our time is starting to wrap up here. If there's questions that we didn't get a chance to get to, we will follow up with you directly. And I wanted to have Paul have a chance to wrap up the webinar, but wanted to take the time to thank you for joining us today. As Paul shared, your impact and your work is noticeable, especially when we all come together for the same purpose. We do have a QR code that's going to be shared with you and coming on the screen. We believe feedback is a gift, and we would love to hear your feedback on how today's webinar went for you. We will be, as I mentioned off the top, sharing a recording of this webinar that you can share with your teams. If you do have additional questions that come up, you're very welcome to reach out to the Not in My City team. The best email is info@notinmycity.ca, and the team there will get to any of your questions. So for the final sign off, I'm going to throw it back to Paul one more time.
Thanks so much, Paula. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I know that we even had partners that were not airline involved that decided to come and be a part of driving this change. You're taking an important lead and role in this movement. All of you, from being on this call, and we're so grateful for airports. I just want to reiterate, I'm hearing from different sectors across Canada. They want to get involved in this program because they're following your leadership. And so this has just been remarkable today. What was intended to be an airport webinar has really turned into something much larger. Not in My City allies continue to sign up, and they're a part of our Not in My City network. And we would encourage you to reach out if there's anything that we can do to help you. Our awareness campaigns are working. We're seeing an increase in Canada of reports of human trafficking, and it confirms that there's far more trafficking activity in Canada than what was being seen. But this needs to be a unified and coordinated response. We can't just identify, we also need to ensure that we're solidifying pathways to recovery, rehabilitation, and supports, and it's just always deepening and connecting this network. Again, I just want to mention, we often see symbols of chains and prison bars and those types of things. But when you think trafficking, we don't want you to think chains. We want you to think trust. It's about the relational approach. And so we just want to thank all of the allies in the Not in My City network. We're rooting what we're doing in hope. We're seeing change happen. We're hearing reports from airports across the entire country of people who feel empowered. Another survivor that I work closely with from the Ontario area, Carly Church, she often says it's virtually impossible to traffic an empowered child. But I would extend that to saying that it's virtually impossible to traffic an empowered person, an empowered parent, for anyone to be involved or connected to trafficking in any way when the community is empowered itself. And that's really what the strength of the Not in My City network and the airport program is all about, an empowered community that knows what to do when they see this crime. And we are disrupting it and dismantling it together. So thank you all so much for being here today. And with that, we'll sign off.